Hi guys, it's Kelly Taylor here, and I'm back with another video for Pink Fresh Studio. Today I am going to be using the Print Shop Modern Botanicals as well as the Blooming Arch. I'm not using the whole suite for each of them. I am using a lot of stencils and the stamps. So because both of these are red rubber, I'm going to use my Misty to stamp them, but I want to remove that foam insert because the red rubber stamps already have that foam built in. I'm going to be stamping these with the Lemon Whip. It's a very light yellow, and the reason that I chose that is because the florals that I'm going to be doing are going to be like pink, red, and green. And so yellow works really nicely with all of those colors. And then in addition to that, I'm going to be stamping the Blooming Arch in that same yellow as well. And the reason, I know you're probably like, Kelly, that's really hard to see. And you are correct, it is. But there is a method to my madness. The reason that I am stamping in a color that is really hard to see is because I want it to disappear when I do my ink blending and my coloring. So I'm choosing to stamp in something that's just kind of going to fade into the background. I don't know if you know, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, that Pink Fresh has a challenge. And so that is where I got my colors from. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But here, there's 3 stencils for the Print Shop Modern Botanicals, and I'm going to be using all 3. So you can use whichever blending brushes you have. These ones, the 1-inch ones, have a nice flat bottom, and they really do put down a ton of color. I am enjoying using them very much. So I started with Grassy Knoll, and that is one of the challenge colors. I actually ended up using all of them. So this month's challenge in October is both ink blending and I should say, you can use the colors which are comparable to Peony, Turquoise, Fruit Punch, Grassy Knoll, and Sweet Mustard. And so while I use them a little differently, I don't think probably most people would pick yellow as the focal point color. I thought it would work really nicely to help make my arch look like it was golden, like a little gold archway that these flowers were kind of, growing up. The tendrils were, kind of growing up and weaving inside of. For the flowers, I am using the 1/2-inch blending brushes, and I am using both the Fruit Punch and the Peony. So that way I have a good mix of the 2 different colors. And the reason that we're doing both is because there are some florals, some smaller florals in the Blooming Arch set, but I wanted to add more florals. And while some of these, you could probably get away with using all of them, honestly. Some of them are a little bit bigger. I wanted them to kind of be on the same scale. I am going to use the majority of them to be the smaller flowers that you kind of see clustered together on the right and on the left-hand side. Those bigger ones, I'll just die cut, because they all die cut together. I'll just put them inside my packaging so that way I can use them for a future project. And not waste the work that I'm doing. So for these, I'm not doing a ton of blending as far as like adding shading, because my intention is to do that with another medium. So here is the arch. I am going to go in with that Sweet Mustard, and this is going to really just blend out that stamping that we did, because they're, this one's a little bit darker, but they're in the same color family. I prefer the ink cubes just because I feel like that gives me kind of more bang for my buck. I get more colors, and I don't have any, I don't have any issue using any size of the brush with the ink cubes. So they work really nicely for that. So once I get this yellow down, this is probably going to be, I don't want to say, it's probably like an intermediate level, but you could use this trick for any of the stamps and stencils. So for the green, I did try to break up the color just a little bit. I added both Grassy Knoll and some olive, just to I guess, kind of have a difference in the color. I do like a lot of variety in my ink blending. Not everybody does. And truly going in there and adding, you know, the extra little details. I'm going to be using alcohol markers, but you could also use colored pencils. I mean, if you used it on watercolor paper, you could probably use that too. But here for the leaves, I'm going to do a combination of the turquoise and the grassy knoll. And again, this is just for more color variation of the leaves. This isn't something that is necessary. It's just something that I like to, you know, kind of throw in there just so they don't all look, you know, the same, like all of the leaves don't look exactly the same, as if, you know, the light was hitting them different ways, or maybe there was a combination of, you know, flower types that would be growing along our arch, just some different things. So anywho, I told you what the challenge was, and this is, I used to do challenges so much when I first got into card making, because they're just such a good way, especially if you're kind of stuck. If you're creatively, like, you know, stuck and you feel like your little crafty mojo is missing, challenges are a really great way to kind of break out of that. And so I used to do the challenges to, like, funny enough, to challenge myself, to help me kind of break out of those like crafty funks that maybe I would fall into. So I love that there's two different ones. You know, they have the colors, and then they also have, like this month's is ink blending, but the month before that, oh, what was it? I can't even remember. One was like washi tape. So they, you know, they have a whole bunch of different ones. Here, this is my background piece, and this is where I'm going to let my turquoise really shine. I'm doing waterfall first, and then I'm going to come in with that turquoise around the edges. And this is just going to kind of give us the illusion of, you know, some blue sky, some grass, like something that's beyond our little archway, so that it looks as if you would be walking into something. So once I get the blue down, I'm going to take the one that we did the grassy knoll with. I'm not going to re-ink it. I'm just going to use what's left on my brush and then just kind of bring it up the middle. Then from here, I'm going to go ahead and use the coordinating dies to cut out my arch before I start doing my coloring. So for me, I am most comfortable with alcohol markers, but like I said before, you can definitely use colored pencils, and colored pencils would be probably a lot easier to control. But basically what I'm going to go in is I'm going to just treat it as if I'm no line coloring it. So I have my stencils down, and then that way it gives me something to follow. So here I'm just going in with my darkest color, and I am adding that to any place where I want there to be shadows. And the way that I explain it that is the easiest for me to remember it is any point where two places meet or where one object lays on top of the other is where we would have shadows. So I am putting them where the what would we call those? Look like the crossbars of the archway would meet, but then also underneath the vines that are growing or the flowers, there would also be a little bit of shading there. And then I'll use my mid-tone to go over that darkest color and then extend it out even further. And then the lightest color, which for me is almost a exact match to the sweet mustard. It's a Y08. I'm going to use that to blend it all together. So I'll go over everything, the darkest, the mid-tone, and then fill in that lightest color. But you can already see, even just by doing this one little corner, how much detail and dimension that is adding. Now there's going to be some people who are like, this is not for me. I don't want to spend this much time to get that much dimension. And I totally get it. You can do just the stencils. I would just recommend that you add a couple more colors of shading while you have the stencil in place, and really utilize those quarter they're 1.5 inch brushes to help you get more concentrated color in specific areas. But for me, because no line coloring frequently scares me, using the stencils as a base is a really, really great way for me to kind of get over that fear. And then I'm going to move on to the vine. This is a little bit time consuming when you're doing the whole archway, but everything else went kind of fast, you know, as far as the like the vines, the leaves, the flowers, like that all went pretty quickly. But I think it's doing the archway did take a little bit longer, just because that's like kind of the base. So you have to figure out where everything is going in order to know where to add the shadows to. So for some of them, I did the 2 darkest green colors, and for some of them, I did the mid-tone and the lighter green color, again, just to kind of supply that variation of color. And I didn't completely cover up the ink blending either. You know, I used that lightest color kind of as a base. So that way, if you have a limited amount of markers or anything like that, you can still get something that you would be happy with, just being able to add in those shadows. So I chose some kind of corally reds. And then here, this is me kind of, finishing up the rest of it so that you could see it the way that it looked when it was all completed. For the flowers, we're going to, once we're done with in completing the archway, we are going to add some shading to those modern print botanicals as well. And you can add as little or as much shading as you would like. For the fruit punch ones, I will stick with the same color combination with the markers. For the ones that are pink, that peony color, I am going to bring in a slightly different color combination. And again, I'm just using these 2 colors to where 2 points meet and where one lays on top of the other, so that they do have just a little bit more dimension, because I wasn't 100% sure what flowers I was going to be using. I colored most of them. Some of them I wasn't sure, like if they were too big or not. So I left in most of the coloring for you to see, but also just in case you wanted to see it. I recently did for the blog hop, for the release blog hop, I did a video where I used this one as well, using different colors, but kind of the same idea with using the stencils and then adding some shading with markers on top of it. And that one incorporated the dotted dotted fancy dies, fancy frames. Anyway, they're like the swirly ones. Really, really like them. I love essentials like that, where they're never going to go out of style and you can just continually use them. Big fan of those types of die cuts. So adding the shading with the pink now, and once again, you're not trying to cover up the entire color, like the lightest color. You do want to leave some of that. We're just adding some shading so that it has a bit more dimension and kind of separates the petals from each other, or the center from the edges of the petals. For some of the other ones, like you would add shading where it's kind of meeting in the middle, which would help it look a little bit more like it was cupped. And then, of course, because when you're doing the stenciling, it doesn't actually add the stems back in. I have to go back in, go right over that stamping with one of the green markers. I chose the mid-tone to do that. But in that video I was just telling you about, I also, I used colored pencil the first time. So either will work to get that look so that they're all interconnected and they look like, they're flowers and the leaves are actually coming off a stem. So here we're going to go ahead and die cut these out. They die cut out all at the same time, which is so nice because then you have a lot of flowers very quickly. In order to blend my blooming arch back into my background, I am going to use a blue color that is very similar to the ink blending, and I'm just going to go in and color those edges white. Now I'm going to start placing my flowers to really fill up my arch to, like I said, add more of those blooms. And for some of them, that means that I'm going to have to trim off the bottom leaves just so that they'll tuck in a little bit nicer, and I can, just glue those behind the arch. But so basically I just went through, some of them, had like 3 flowers on them, and I cut those apart. Some of them I left them whole, really just trying to make sure that I could fit them nicely into the arch and that they would kind of look like they always belonged there. Don't be afraid to let them face kind of different directions. They don't all have to be facing inward. Some of them can be facing out or away from each other. That's just going, flowers when they're growing in nature, like run wild. And so it's okay if yours run a little wild as well. Then once I have them all trimmed out, I do add a little bit of glue on the top, like the colored portion, just at the bottom, and then the glue behind it so that it sticks to the arch, both where I've tucked it in to the die cut and where it's sitting on top of the die cut. We want to make sure that they're nice and secure and they're not going to fall out of there. This one with like the little bellflowers is one of my favorite ones. I think it's super pretty, and it fits really nicely into that little top portion of that arch to add some blooms in. These are, like I said, in the other one, I used them just by themselves, and I think that they worked really well. I love that, we can kind of stretch them out and use them with other product. I am going to go back in with that blue marker and, color in that outline so that it does look like it's a part of it. This part I know is going to seem really redundant, but it really does help the 2 pieces look like one. And that is going back in and kind of tracing out those, the leaves, or if there was a portion where it's like laying over the archway, filling that into the background of the die cuts that are on top. And that's going to help them be so much more cohesive so that it looks like they belong together and not just like we have shoved 2 different styles or 2 different types of stamps together. I did want to add a little bit of interest by popping up my arch. Now everything is glued into place already, so I can add in my foam tape really easily, behind that, because a lot of the open areas are now being filled with flowers. So now once I have everything covered with my foam tape, I can go ahead and go in and do the release paper. This one's pretty easy to line up because it fits an A2 size card so well. And even though it's an arch frame, it has the squared off top. So I wasn't too worried about it being wiggly. Sometimes those pieces can be a bit wiggly, but this one's actually pretty solid. So I went ahead and put that on. And then, you could add in those bigger florals kind of down toward the bottom. I didn't. I chose to just do the sentiment. I'm using a gold sparkle marker to go right over those, the yellow in the archway. I thought it would help it to look more golden with that little bit of shimmer on it. And then for the sentiment, I am using the calico white on white cardstock, and then I'm going to heat emboss that with some white detail embossing powder. And then that way I will be able to add any color that I would like to the background to help it match my, what I need. I really liked the idea of it being the white sentiment. And originally I went in with the turquoise, and it just, wasn't 100% sure that I loved it. So I did stamp another one with the fruit punch, I think, and then I trimmed that out. I would always encourage you, to to try different sentiments to see which one you like the best. And I ended up thinking of like, I like the blue, but it just wasn't enough contrast and it was a hard time reading it. So I just went back in with that turquoise and a smaller blending brush so I could get really concentrated color. And that ended up being the ticket. That now it was definitely more legible. That white was popping off the blue. And I was much happier with it. So it was just basically like an embossed resist. And then I added the extra one behind it just to help it to have just a little bit more weight, since I was going to stretch it across the center. And so there are some foam pieces in the middle that are going to help hold it up so that structurally it's sound. And then I added glue to the left and right hand side so that it would stretch across that blue, like that archway there and all the little blooms. In order to fill in a little bit of that space and also accent our sentiment, I used the Glacier jewels. These are like a white iridescent. They pretty much match everything, and they are my favorite. They are my favorite jewel. So yeah, if you're following me on my regular channel, you probably see them a lot because I super love them. But then once I added the gems, I did go back in with a clear glitter just on top of the flowers because I love all the glittery things. And then that was it. That finished off the card. I hope that this gives you some inspiration to try a no-line coloring look, to try to get more dimension out of your stencils. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.